right, welcome everyone. Nice to see you all today. Thank you so much for joining us for the virtual launch event for the Homeland Security Startup Studio. We are going to get started here since it looks like a lot of audience members have already joined us, and we also have our panelists present. So let's get this going. And I just want to say we're really delighted to host you all today and welcome you to talk more about the Homeland Security Startup Studio 2023 program and opportunities for you. Additionally, we're really excited to host a keynote from DHS S&T, as well as 2 alumni companies from the previous 2022 program. So in terms of our agenda today and what you all can expect, I'm going to give some quick background and opening remarks on the program, and then I'll hand it over to our keynote, Dr. Samuel Howerton. And following our keynote, we will host our 2022 alumni panel with 2 really illustrious alumnus. So really excited to have them here today. And then lastly, I will go over final announcements, really just more reminders about how you can get involved with the Homeland Security Startup Studio 2023 if you're interested. And lastly, there is an optional portion of the event today. So if you're interested in learning more about the program and want to talk to a member of the FedTech staff or a member of the S&T staff, you're welcome to stop by a virtual Q&A portion of the event, which will take place at 2 o'clock today. The one thing I'll add, as I mentioned, we welcome any audience members today to join if you have questions, but that portion of the event will take place on a separate Zoom link, which we will share at the end of the event today. Other quick tips for you all, if you have any questions throughout the event today and can't make it to the live Q&A session, feel free to drop your questions in the chat and a member of the FedTech staff will answer your questions. So again, if you have any thoughts or comments and want to utilize the Q&A feature at the bottom, feel free to do so. In terms of a contingency plan, so in the very unlikely event that for some reason Zoom crashes on us all and we are unable to restart the webinar, please note that a member of the FedTech staff will send out a Microsoft Teams invite to you all over email. Again, highly unlikely, but if it does happen, we always like to have a backup plan. So I just want to take a moment to introduce FedTech. So I'm an associate here at FedTech, and I work to support and manage the Homeland Security Startup Studio program. And FedTech, as a larger organization, is really a venture firm that sits at the intersection of breakthrough technologies, entrepreneurship, and mission-driven organizations. And we leverage our innovation ecosystem to ensure partners from federal agencies to Fortune 500 companies can stay ahead and unlock benefits of deep technology. So there are 4 sort of key areas at FedTech that you should keep in mind. Firstly, there is internal innovation, and then we have startup studios and our accelerator programming, and lastly, our professional services. But today, we're really here to focus on the startup studios, which aims to spin out early stage startups by matching entrepreneurs with innovative IP and technology from federal and university labs. And today specifically, really excited to talk to you all about the upcoming Homeland Security Startup Studio 2023 program. So I'll pause there and just want to also highlight some of the records that we have around spinouts and our work we've done at FedTech. So in terms of teams built around IP, we have over 200 teams built around federal IP. Over 85 companies have been created through our programming. Over 30 million private and federal contracts have been awarded. 160 companies accelerated. And last but certainly not least, over $1 billion in investment raised from private investors. So with that, though, I want to pause and really just take a step back and assess why we're here today and really give a high-level overview of the Homeland Security Startup Studio. So at the highest level, the studio's main goal is to identify, accelerate, and deliver commercial applications of technologies from U.S. labs and research centers to support the DHS mission. And in terms of what you can expect from the upcoming 2023 program, this innovative studio program will form teams of entrepreneurs and match them with groundbreaking technologies to assess their commercialization potential. So entrepreneurs that participate in this program will work hand in hand with lab scientists, inventors, and work to explore forming a company to commercialize that technology that, we hope will both solve government and commercial customers' problems and unmet needs. So if you're interested in being an entrepreneur in the upcoming cohort, good news is that applications are live for our 2023 program. And so you're welcome to submit your application today. And we really encourage anyone that is on the webinar today to apply. We're seeking a variety of different individuals for the cohort. So I also want to highlight, because I admit, I recognize that the Startup Studio process is likely new to a lot of you all on the call today. So want to highlight what you can expect from the 2023 program, and also the alumni that are on the webinar today will be able to speak more and give some background and context as to their experience. But for yourself and what you can expect for the 2023 program, firstly, you do need to apply and go through a rigorous interview process. And all of this portion will be completed at the end of January. And then assuming that you are selected to be in the program, we will pair you with a team of entrepreneurs and promising R&D at the start. So once you are, admitted into the program, you're paired with your teams. The program itself is 5 months, and again, the goal is to ideally identify a path towards commercialization with your paired technology, and we hope that you all go on to launch a new venture. The program itself, as I mentioned, has 2 key phases. So the first phase is really focused on identifying product market fit for your technology and validating your business model with your potential end users. And phase 1 itself culminates in an internal pitch day. It's really exciting. We have some key stakeholders who are on, and it's a really nice sort of halfway point for the program. Now, phase 2 is more focused around company formation, and that portion of the program culminates in a live pitch day that both of our alumni participate. It's called Converge. It's really fun. We had a couple hundred different attendees that day, so I'm sure they'll speak more to that experience as well. But this is what you can expect. Again, if you have questions and want to, dig more into what the interview process looks like, what the actual program will look like, feel free again to stop by the virtual Q&A that's going to kick off at 2 o'clock here. Okay, so I mentioned this earlier, but I see some more people are signing on. But as I said, applications are open. So if you're interested in participating in the program, I want to highlight again that we're seeking a couple of different groups of people. So firstly, entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are a key element of our Homeland Security Startup Studio program. And FedTech works to recruit, we want entrepreneurs with very diverse backgrounds and a variety of different experiences to really help build out our diverse cohort. We're also looking for mentors. So maybe you're interested in the program, but you don't want to be a full-time entrepreneur. It is quite a commitment. We recommend you see about our mentor opportunities. Each team will be paired with one mentor, and their job is really to act as a subject matter expertise to help guide the team and really coach and champion them throughout the program. And then last, but certainly not least, we are, of course, also looking for technology, right? We have 10 teams that will be participating in the upcoming program. So 10 teams or 30 entrepreneurs, but we also need 10 technologies that will be paired with those 10 teams. And so if you have IP that you think might be a good fit for the program, we strongly encourage you to submit your technology for review. All right. I'm going to take a moment and just pause to really thank our program partner. So the Homeland Security Startup Studio is the result of a partnership between the Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology Directorate, and FedTech. And I really just want to thank you all for your support and partnership. And we're really looking forward to working with you for the 2023 program. All right. So with that, it is my honor to introduce you all to Dr. Samuel Howerton, the Chief Scientist for the Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology Directorate. I'd like to turn it over to him now to speak a little bit more about S&T and give an overview of the studio for 2023. Dr. Howerton, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Greta, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope that you're having a great day today. I'm really pleased to join you today for the launch of the third annual cohort of the Homeland Security Startup Studio. It's got a little bit of alliteration there. Let me begin by thanking FedTech for hosting the event and for their continued partnership with DHS S&T. So I'm relatively new to DHS, but I'm really excited to kick off this opportunity because this is a program that really helps us identify novel solutions to complex challenges that are facing the nation by really harnessing the collective talents of entrepreneurs from across the United States. As a chief scientist, one of my primary roles is to imagine the future and then help shape our investments today to be prepared for it. And as I think about the future 10 to 20 years from now, I see a couple of different things. First, I see a world where climate change has really induced more migration among the people that live within the United States, as well as those who are living outside of its borders. I also see a world where state actors, right? So you're thinking about other nation states or transnational criminal organizations, think like cartels, right? And individual extremists have a lot more tools to try and negatively impact the everyday lives of Americans, whether here in the United States, abroad, or increasingly in the world of cyberspace. I also see a world that's pretty hopeful though too, because it's one where we have the tools to not only respond to problems, but most importantly, actually to anticipate them and prevent harm from happening before it begins. And I think that future can be made real through deliberate partnerships and collaborations that begin today through programs like the Startup Studio. Our partnership with FedTech is a great example of how industry and government can work together toward mutual benefit. So the Startup Studio helps S&T, my directorate, drive innovation to meet our needs. But at the same time, it provides an opportunity for those with great ideas, that's all of you out there, right, to enter the marketplace. This year in 2020, the 2023 Startup Studio is really a renewed opportunity for the directorate to partner with entrepreneurs to develop and commercialize some really groundbreaking technologies that can make a difference for our frontline operators across the enterprise. And when we talk about that, it's not just those of us who are in the federal government, but it's actually the local first responders, whether they be in healthcare, police, fire, you name it. Those are the people that we want to help most especially. So the Startup Studio really enables researchers and entrepreneurs to identify new use cases for their technologies, helps them expand our industrial base. And that's really one of the things that's most essential to us accomplishing our mission. We don't build things and we certainly don't sell things, but those of you on the other end of the screen do. So let me describe what success looks like from the past year as we look a little bit toward the next. So the 2022 Startup Studio featured a number of technologies from the federal government, from places like the US Secret Service to some DHS centers of excellence focusing on critical infrastructure or maritime security, the Naval Research Lab, our Naval Surface Warfare Center, and Brigham Young University. As Greta was mentioning, the 2022 cohort wrapped up earlier this year in July, and it had some pretty impressive results. Of the 10 teams that formed back in March, 9 of them completed the 18-week program and demonstrated a viable path to company formation or tech commercialization. 7 teams participated in the Converge showcase she was describing last summer, and they pitched their technologies to an expert panel. 250 people attended, and that included people who were investors, media, government and industry stakeholders, and other entrepreneurial community leaders. 2 teams delivered winning pitches at Converge, Signum and Ether, and you're going to hear from them in a couple of minutes, and I think it's going to be really exciting. 4 teams incorporated as companies, and 3 continued to pursue company formation. All of those companies, we S&T are invested in. We sponsor an alumni support program for all the teams that have formed or are pursuing, and that's really designed to help the teams navigate the early stages of company formation. The program has things like workshops on intellectual property, management, incorporation, branding, marketing, all the things that you need to do to be successful. FedTech also is a great partner because they provide tailored advisory services to the teams. Things like licensing support, assistance in applying for government funding, specifically things like the Small Business Innovation Research Grants that not only DHS, but a lot of the other government agencies provide. So before I wrap up, I really want to emphasize how important programs like the Startup Studio are in helping DHS to execute its mission as the research and development arm, right? As you watch today's launch event and hear from participants from last year's program, I hope you come away with the message that DHS is actually an eager partner for entrepreneurs. By pairing cutting edge technologies with skilled innovators and business professionals, the Startup Studio really promotes entrepreneurship and accelerates needed technology solutions towards commercialization. As we invest in these new ideas and approaches for commercializing federally funded research and technology, we really also think critically about future research investments and the diverse workforce needed to deliver solutions that benefit all of us. So the teams from 2021 and 2022 included a really diverse array of inventors and entrepreneurs. 82% of the team members included women or people of color. And in 2023, the cohort continues to emphasize really the value of diversity and inclusion. We seek broad-based participation so that the next Startup Studio can bring in diverse knowledge and perspectives to help commercialize innovative solutions for Homeland Security. In closing, S&T and FedTech are really ready to work with you. This is a call to action, and it's an open invitation to apply as an entrepreneur or a mentor, as Greta mentioned, or if you've got good intellectual property, to come in as an inventor. So I and my colleagues that are on the call today really hope that you throw your hat in the ring as a potential participant in the 2023 Startup Studio so that DHS and the American public can benefit from your creativity and expertise. So thank you very much for joining us today, and I'll turn it back over to you, Greta.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Howerton. We really appreciate you joining us today and great remarks. And with that, we will move on to our alumni panel. Really excited again to be hosting Andrew Terrell and Dirk van der Vaart. And so with that, I'm also going to hand it over to my colleague, Robert, who will be hosting the panel. Robert, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Greta. Dr. Howerton, thank you so much for your remarks as well. And just a point to the audience, I definitely have a couple questions for both Dirk and Andrew here, but feel free to continue dropping your questions for them in the chat. I'll be monitoring that and I'll be incorporating some of those questions into my discussion here. But to go ahead and introduce our 2022 alumni, both of whom, as Dr. Howerton had mentioned, had actually won our Converge competition. They came in a dead heat tie with the judges after we tallied the judges' scorecard. So there was nothing else to do except flip a coin. So we decided not to, and we gave them both the trophy, and they both deserved it. So Andrew Terrell is an international economist, former diplomat and technologist, and Dirk is a dynamic executive leader who specializes in development and execution of rapid growth strategies for the defense and homeland security industry. But those are just some high-level introductions for both these guys. So Dirk, I wanted to start off with you, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. Great to be here. And again, appreciate the time, Robert. And Dr. Howerton, listening to your remarks makes me want to sign up as an entrepreneur again and do this all over again. So thank you for your remarks. I come out of a long background in the federal space, spent the first 15 years of my career as an intelligence officer in the intelligence community, and then spent the rest of the last 25 years or so in the defense industry, working for companies both large and small and mid-tier, mostly in the technology space. And in the last 2 years, have been self-employed as a consultant and an executive coach. And then just recently, as a result of the Homeland Security Studio, founded Ether with 2 other colleagues, and we're busily working on commercializing that technology now.
Great. Thanks, Dirk. And Andrew, I'll ask you to do the same.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thanks again, Robert and Greta, for having us. It's always a pleasure to be among the FedTech team. My name is Andrew Terrell. As Robert mentioned, I kind of got my start in economics. I was on the White House's National Economic Council and worked as the liaison between that office and the Office of Science and Technology Policy, National Security, and USTR. I've also lived another life as a diplomat, serving as British consul and advisor to Sir Kim Derrick, who is the British ambassador to the United States on technology and trade issues. But I have been coding and building tech projects and working for tech companies since I was basically 8-10 years old. So most of my work these days revolves around data science, graph networks, and AI. And I do that for my day job for the moment still, as well as in my capacity as CTO for Signum.
Andrew, I'll start off with you again. Can you tell us a little bit more about Signum, the technology, and the current state of your company?
Yeah, absolutely. So Signum, we initially, our team started out with a technology from MITRE, who is our lab partner, and we've worked with closely since. Initially, it was designed as a combination of optical and thermal cameras to detect vitals from a remote period away. So it was kind of conceived during a COVID situation. And we've since then taken that technology and applied abstracting the compute, constructing different like UI prototypes and user experience prototypes for it, and are now at a stage where we are reviewing the terms of our research and development license, which we plan on pursuing. And we're also putting together the paperwork for an FDA process. So that's kind of where we're at currently.
Great. Dirk, and if you could tell us a little bit more about Ether, the technology that the company is built around, and your current status.
Sure. So Ether, we're working to commercialize a methodology that was invented and patented by the Naval Research Lab. It is a way of identifying chemical threats, particularly vapors and gases in the environment, that mimics the way the human eye sees color. Most chemical sensors today require you to interact with the chemical in some way. So you've got to collect a sample and then subject it to some sort of testing. This looks at chemicals just the way we look at in the environment and see color. It's capable of seeing colors or seeing chemicals out in the environment. So we're commercializing that sensor. When the previous cohort ended back in July, we were right at a time frame where it was about the time where you needed to get your submissions in for SBIR and STTR submissions. So we very quickly incorporated as an LLC in the state of Virginia, and then pursued all of our federal registrations, our cage codes, and all that kind of stuff so that we could submit a couple of SBIRs. So we are today an LLC. However, we recognize that we need to do the conversion sometime here in the next couple of months to an S Corp so that we can start to issue shares and do all that kind of stuff as well. We didn't have time for that because we wanted to get our submissions in. So we're organized today. There are 3 of us on the team as co-founders. And we're actively working with a couple of different prototype houses right now to get some drawings done and get our product to market as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Dirk. And I just want to point out to the audience, with this startup studio, you have Andrew's technology that was in the healthcare industry, Dirk's, which is in the first responder industry. And that just goes to show the breadth and diversity of the technology that we have to offer. We've had technologies in the ag industry as well as in supply chain. So if you have any interest, it's likely that there's a technology that will be suiting for you. So now turning back to the discussion here. So I want to bring us all the way back to the beginning when you didn't know your teammates, you didn't know your technology. Andrew, how did you hear about the Homeland Security Startup Studio and what brought you to apply?
Yeah, so at the time, I had a number of programs that my manager had brought to my attention. And he was basically, these are a list of programs I've heard through the grapevine that you might find interesting. If you're curious or you need support, let us know. I was lucky enough at the company that I was at to have buy-in and leadership support to join a process like FedTech, which does take a good bit of your time. You know, you have to know how much you're going to commit. And I've owned and consulted on my own. I've owned small businesses, but I haven't really scaled. And so the more tech oriented I've gotten in my professional career, the more I've become interested in building products that could be scaled. And so I wanted to learn how to build a business that could really do that. And I wanted partners, I wanted support. And the more I learned about FedTech, the more it seemed like it would be the perfect program to provide that, not only in co-founders, but the support from the coaches and mentors that we had. I mean, Tom and Radhika were fantastic through this process. So I found it out through my manager, but it wasn't the first one on the list, but it was the one that I was most interested in because I didn't want to just participate in another group discussion or social meeting. I wanted to build something with a team.
Dirk, how about you?
Well, I to be perfectly blunt, I found out about it on LinkedIn. And about the same time, I had long time over the course of my career been involved with DHS S&T, so I followed them on LinkedIn, and that popped up the opportunity through FedTech on my LinkedIn feed. But at about the same time that I noticed it, 2 or 3 of my former colleagues also reached out to me and said, "Hey, we saw this thing on LinkedIn and you really ought to do it. This is right up your alley." So much like Andrew, I started doing the research into what FedTech was and what the program was all about, and thought, yeah, this is a unique opportunity to build something and commercialize a technology that's already been sort of researched and some work's been done. So it really is an accelerator from that perspective, and it has been an absolute wild ride ever since. Loving every minute of it.
Great. And following up on that, do you have any recommendations for those of whom that are actually going through the application process now? Any recommendations for the initial application, for the Super Day interviews, or simply just for the patience of waiting through the entire process?
Yeah, there's, as with everything, there's a process and you got to get through it. But I would say really just focus in on your passion, focus in on why this is something that's appealing to you. What do you want to get out of it? What do you want to bring to the world in terms of that? And if you can really communicate to the FedTech staff and to the DHS reviewers, et cetera, why you're really passionate about doing this, why you're going to be willing to put in the hours that it takes and go through the grind that it takes to get a company started up and get funded and all those kinds of things, really speak to that. Speak to why you're passionate about the mission of DHS S&T and bringing useful solutions to the world that can help our frontline responders, both military and sometimes commercial as well. But I think that just tapping into that inner fire is what really is going to help you get through this process.
Now, I want to jump right into what I think everybody's most interested in, which is the cohort experience. So, Dirk, can you tell us a little bit about your experience during the Homeland Security Startup Studio? What did you learn, and what were some of the main skills that you got out of the program?
Wow, what did I learn? How many days do we have here? But it's been a tremendous experience, really, as Andrew also alluded to in a couple of minutes ago. Just the support in general of the FedTech staff and the DHS advocates that team with you throughout the process has been tremendous. A couple of things that really stand out for me early on in the process. Practically from day one, you're going to hear the term customer discovery over and over and over again, and that is really reaching out to the audience that is a potential buyer, user, or stakeholder or influencer around your chosen technology. That seems daunting and somewhat drudgery-like at first, but to this day, long after the program has formally ended, we're still engaged on a daily basis in customer discovery. I probably make 10 to 15 phone calls a day reaching out to potential customers for our technology, and really embrace that. Learn to use that as an opportunity to learn more about your product, but more importantly, learn what the first responders and potential users out there need to make their lives better and make their jobs safer and more productive, et cetera. That's going to become the fuel that convinces you that you need to build a company and you need to bring this technology to the world in some fashion. So again, it sounds daunting and there's a lot of numbers associated with it. You'll be pushed really hard by your FedTech mentors and FedTech sponsors to get your phone calls done and get your numbers up. Don't approach it as just checking the box, but really look at that as your opportunity to convince yourself, and also to use that as the fuel that says, hey, our customers need this. We need to commercialize this technology to bring it to them, so that they can make our world a safer place. That's one. What did I learn? Gosh, even though I have an MBA and thought I knew a lot about business, and I've started businesses before, I learned so much more detail about what goes into founding a company, and sort of laying the foundation for that, that I didn't know before. So it was a tremendous experience along those lines. But yeah, just absolutely phenomenal. Love it. Hard work though.
Great, Andrew. And I'll ask you the same question. What did you learn? What was your overall experience? And what were some of the main skills that you developed?
I think the main takeaway, if I had to sum it up in one lesson, would be that it's all about teams, right? So the more that I think you're trying to separate like what's successful in the process from what's not successful in the process, is it's really about the communication of the teams, right? So be prepared to commit, and in my opinion, at least 2 evenings a week, if not 3, to work on this for a period of at least a year, right? And then go into this and then assess your teammates, assess your chemistry with your teammates, and be honest with yourself on the level of commitment that you're able and willing to give. Then after you either have that chemistry or you don't, take that in and double check the commitment on timing, then proceed, right? Coming to VCs and discovery process, it's about the teams and it's about solving a problem more than it is your particular solution, right? So this gets to a lesson I think that, Robert, many of the panelists that you had during our cohort made a reference to, which is you have to be able to pivot. So you're going to come into a group with 2, 3 strangers. You have to figure out whether that chemistry works. You have to commit a lot of time to customer discovery, as Dirk mentioned. You always have to be constantly doing customer discovery, and it is the hardest part. And it's good that you think it's front loaded, but it continues throughout the entire process. But you need to go into that process understanding that the particular mode of your solution right now, that it can pivot, and that's okay. At the end of the day, when you're going out to raise money from friends and family or institutional investors, they are going to care about how you articulate your team dynamic and how you articulate how you're solving a problem, more so than the specifics of your solution, which sometimes for technical folks and engineers, that can be a bit of a conceptual mountain to overcome. That would be my main lesson, is it's all about the teams, the chemistry, the pitch, how you're solving a problem, more so than your technology.
I want to come back to that in just a second, but I also want to answer a question that's come up a couple of times in the chat that, Andrew, you were alluding to. But, we ask our entrepreneurs to dedicate about 20 hours a week. And as Dirk, as you said, there's a lot of customer discovery that goes on. There's a lot of phone calls that you're making in addition to the workshops that you're attending. So how did you balance the program with your day jobs and other commitments? How did you find that balance, and how did you execute when it came to the program?
That's a good question. One, it's great to have a supportive manager, which I kind of alluded to earlier, kind of flagged for me a little bit on LinkedIn, different programs, and some which he participated in, some which he hadn't. So I think that's critical. And then also, it just comes down to time management, prioritization, which is going to be a good skill for you to have if you're aspiring to be in a C-suite anyway. And you need to be able to say no to things. I think that's also a big lesson that I would take away. And it's part of the team, it's part of customer discovery, it's part of pivoting, is when to say no. If you're someone who's not comfortable saying no, you better get comfortable saying no. And that's part of prioritization.
Yeah, I would agree. I happen to have the luxury of working for myself, so scheduling my time and balancing my day job in this was a little bit easier. But look, there's no escaping the fact that standing up a company, getting familiar with your technology, doing the customer discovery to determine, is there a viable market out there and how do you address it? It's a grind. It takes a lot of effort. And so it's just a commitment to saying, hey, sometimes there's late nights, sometimes it's weekends, sometimes I get up a couple of hours earlier in the morning to get it done. But you gotta be convinced and convicted that this is something that needs to be done, and you got to have that sort of fire in the belly that says, I'm going to drive through it, because there's going to be just a constant onslaught of obstacles in your way. And if you don't have that inner sense that this is something really important that needs to be commercialized and needs to be brought to bear on the problems that Dr. Howerton highlighted in his remarks, then you probably won't find the energy or the passion to carry you through. So it is a bit of a grind, but it can be done. It's not onerous. It is what you make of it. And just as with everything else in life, you get out of it what you're willing to put into it. So the more you can put in, the more rich this experience will be. And again, the resources that FedTech and DHS make available to you throughout this process are tremendous. And I can't say enough about don't skimp on capitalizing on those resources that they make available to you.
And I would just add one other thing to that as well, in that it's also balancing that with your team members, right? Yeah. You not only want to feel supported and you have that time, maybe you're managing it for yourself, but if your other team members don't also manage it properly themselves and also communicate with you, then you're going to have a situation where you could feel like they're not putting enough time because they don't have the same arrangement with their management or whatnot. And different people are going to be able to scale up and have different commitments throughout the entire year. Like I had a death in our family, right? So I had to scale down for a few weeks with what's happened. But my team members, we communicated with each other at least twice, 3, 4, 5 times, a week, sometimes multiple times a day. And we were always in sync, even though we had to scale down occasionally, right? So just keeping everyone in the loop, making sure that everyone is communicating and everyone feels tied to that mission. Everyone has to believe in it. As long as you believe in it, as long as you have the chemistry, a lot of the other friction will disappear. But if you don't have that, everything else becomes harder.
Yeah, Andrew, I want to dive on that point a little bit more, that about the team. So I know your team, you three came in as complete strangers. You had never met each other before. Can you talk a little bit more about those initial meetings, how you watched the relationship grow, and now where you are as a team, and really just how well you're working together?
Yeah, I mean, we come from very different backgrounds, right? So just for context for those who've joined us, my other co-founders, one is a former Navy SEAL, and the other one has also started other small companies and works in kind of the tech infrastructure and security space, right? I come from the AI ML solutions architect and the econ space, and a little bit more public policies, right? So very different backgrounds. But when we interacted with one another, we immediately recognized that each of us had a degree of expertise and skills, and we were all willing to listen, and we all valued each other's thoughts. And I think the fact that we were able to empathize with one another, and that we had all worked in some defense or defense adjacent sector, I think that went a long way to closing some of those gaps that can arise when you have strangers thrown into a pod together, right? So I think that was really critical. Even though we had very different backgrounds, we had enough of a common experience, and we're also around the same ages as well. So we had a lot in common. And I think I think we just had a lot of respect for one another coming into this process. But I'm happy to answer other specific questions about the team though as well. Again, I think that's the kind of, it's a sort of thing you never know if you're going to get right. I can't imagine it, you guys on the FedTech side, when you're throwing these teams together, like all the calculus that goes into that. But it's kind of the magic that I'm sure you never know if it will spark or how big the spark will be. But for us, it was was definitely there from the get-go.
Yeah, and just to comment on that, what we do, we first of all, we have our entire application process. We go through the round of final interviews, and then we also use an AI tool that allows us to match personalities together so that we could generate that spark. So we, of course, use our own human element from the interviews, but then we also employ some other tools to make sure that there is that spark. And, I even remember, Andrew, with your team, and Dirk also with your team, when Greta and I were putting the teams together, we were like, these teams are going to work really well. And, a year later, here we are. So Dirk, I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about coming together with Don and Shaman, who had already applied as a team, and how that relationship grew to where you guys are at now.
Yeah, interesting. The team that I started with is not the team that I ended with, interestingly enough, along this journey. So the technology remained the same, however, but my original two teammates had to, very early on, right at the very beginning of the project, had to disenroll for various professional reasons. And then Don and Shaman were able to jump on, who had already worked together with each other before to commercialize a drone technology. So I was very fortunate to link up with those two. Here we are, 10, 11 months later down the road. The three of us have actually never met face to face still, because they're both out in California. But we developed a really strong team dynamic. We worked pretty intentionally to kind of get to know each other and really to discover what our drivers were. Don is a 30-year veteran of the fire department, and had to retire prematurely because he was critically injured on the job. So he's got a burning passion for our first responders. Shaman is a serial entrepreneur who's founded a number of companies before, and has worked with Don to found a different company. And then my background in the defense and security space, we meshed really well together. And so it worked really well. But again, it does take some intention, especially in this remote environment. So we did make sure that we dedicated some time just to get to know each other, and have some social interaction beyond just getting the work done. So the team, and over time, as we grew and as we really dug into it, I think the technology itself and the potential solution also tended to draw us together more as we started to get more and more excited about where this could take us. So it was a great dynamic. Yeah.
And just to quickly add on to that, I think the most important fact for our team to work together is that regardless of what has happened, save in deaths in the family and like really serious life circumstances, every single Monday evening, every single Thursday evening since the beginning of this cohort, without fail, except in those very extenuating circumstances, we have spent at minimum an hour together.
Yeah.
And that is, and that's of course outside of the other meetings that we do and outside of the FedTech stuff that we do, the seminars and whatnot. Outside of that, absolutely at a minimum. And that's not including all of the texts and the messages. Like the more communication we've had, the better team we have become. And like Dirk said, sometimes that means being intentional, and it means, okay, this Thursday we didn't have too much progress. Oh, should we just cancel that meeting and get it back? Or should we still have it and just socially catch up and build those bonds? You should do the latter, even though you probably want to do the former. You should always do the latter.
Now, jumping into it a little bit more here, and this is an open question for either one of you, but what were some of the more challenging aspects of the program, and how did you go about overcoming those challenges? And then also, how did you utilize the FedTech and DHS resources to go ahead and overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so a couple of them. One of the big challenges for us to get our heads around early on was the maturity stage of the technology we were dealing with. We tended to think early on in the process of it as a product, as a thing that we would then go out and sell and find an audience for. And we really kind of had to pivot relatively early on in the program to understand that really what we were dealing with was a methodology rather than a product, and that then we had to create the embodiment for that methodology that was most appropriate to our chosen industry segment and end user group. So that required a little bit of a mind shift. And to be honest, our FedTech mentor, Tom Martin, was really instrumental in helping us make that shift and sort of helping us clarify our thinking around that. So again, the mentors and advisors that FedTech assigns can really be a tremendous resource in helping the team sort of clarify their thinking early on. Later, as we got into it, dealing with the Naval Research Laboratory, a lot of the issues surrounding how do you license something and how do you protect their intellectual property that has gone into it, but also merge that with intellectual property that we will and have been developing as a team. And how do you define those boundaries legally, and how do you pay for it, and who gets what? All of that was really something that none of the three of us had ever grappled with before in any of our other startups. So again, having Bianca Thayer and some of the other resources that were made available to us to talk us through the licensing aspects, help us sit down at the table with the NRL tech transfer team and develop a relationship with them, and really talk it through and work that out was really tremendous. That was tough to understand, but it really put us on the right footing to understand where we needed to go in order to shape the product and bring it to market. So yeah, a couple of big challenges there, but again, it really comes down to FedTech will lay all these things on the table for you. You've got to pick them up and use them. And there's a lot of support for you there, but you gotta take the initiative to say, hey, when these resources are made available to you, make the phone call, get on their Calendly, schedule the time, and get the team together and chat with these folks, because the amount of knowledge that's there is massive, and they can really short circuit or shortcut a lot of heartache by just listening to them and taking their advice.
Andrew, what about you?
Well, you heard Dirk mention Coach Tom early on, and it's no coincidence that Tom was the FedTech coach both for Aether and for Signum. I mean, nothing against the other coaches, but I don't know if any basketball fans, he's the Coach K of FedTech teams here, I guess.
Absolutely.
But absolutely critical in keeping us kind of grounded. I think one of the things, no matter how good of a team you have, right, you have all these different backgrounds and all these different approaches, and especially early on, throwing so much at us that we're trying to digest, and having a coach and having a mentor, Rahika, there for our team was critical, I think, into keeping us grounded instead of flying out in 1,000 different directions, kind of put a little cocoon over us and kind of keep us focused. I think that was absolutely critical, because maybe we would have made it on our own there. Maybe we wouldn't. I guarantee it would have taken at least 5 times as long. So that was really, really helpful. I think I think the maturity stage thing that Dirk mentioned is also, I think, a little bit of an issue for us. And I hope I alluded to this a little bit when I was talking about it's like about the team and, not necessarily the product, but the solution. And it's kind of the methodology for the solution that you're trying to figure out, because I think we also had a similar situation where, you're kind of given this technology and you feel like you have more constraints around it than you probably actually do. I think the FedTech team has actually did a great job in trying to communicate to us. I think it's just for cohorts and for those of coming in, it's difficult to bridge that gap. Actually, I think that the presentation, the slides that you gave Greta and Rob in those first several sessions, that was the main lesson I took away, is like, don't feel too constrained by this. But I feel like no matter if you're hearing it when you're working with the technology week to week, it takes a little bit of time to sink in. So I think that was critical. That was a kind of mental barrier to get over. Working with IP, legal, incorporation is very intimidating, right? So I think that Bianca, especially on the IP side, it was great to have her as a resource. I think the only thing I would communicate to those of you who would be interested in joining the next cohort is that it just comes at you all so fast. So take copious notes, because sometimes I would need the session from 2 weeks ago, but not until 3 weeks later, because I just hadn't got to the point where I could digest it because I was just trying to catch up. But Bianca and others, the specialists that you guys provided, were still available, and just to take advantage of the resources that are given, even when it feels like it's at a breakneck speed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one other
just to
quick comment.
clarify for the audience. Oh yeah, Derek, go for it.
Just one other quick comment I'll make on that is the interaction between the teams was also tremendous. We learned so much from each other, and and Andrew's team, we're really good friends, and we communicate, fairly frequently outside of FedTech, and just keep each other apprised on what we're doing, et cetera. So we formed some great bonds, but also really a lot of learning amongst our other cohort members there. So that was really instrumental for us as well. We got some great tips and advice from some of the other teams.
Yeah, thank you. And you anticipated something I was going to say and one of my next questions. But yeah, so just for clarification for the audience, within this program, there are coaches, there are mentors, and there are advisors. The coaches are assigned about 3 to 4 teams. And as we heard here, both of these teams were with our coach, Tom Martin. Mentors are assigned one-on-one, and then the advisors are there for external help. So Bianca, who's been referenced a couple times, provides help on licensing and IP. And then we also have advisors for things like SBIR, in addition to legal advisors. So anybody that you might need, we'll have somebody that you could go ahead and tap on when needed. So with that, I want to turn our attention towards what's going on now. If you could tell us a little bit more about the support that you received from FedTech following the program, specifically through our alumni program, how that's been working out for you, what have you drawn from that, and how has that helped keep the boat moving forward for both of your companies?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Oh no, you want to go ahead, Dirk?
sure. So where we are now, we're involved in the alumni program, which is the follow-up to the official program. So we still have some workshops and things that we're doing on a monthly basis that are very helpful. Most importantly, we continue to rely on some of the advisors and resources that were made available to us during the formal program to help sort of solidify where we're at in terms of our stage of development. Right now for Ether, our focus is very much on getting our product actually developed, and we're starting now to really put an emphasis on trying to raise some money, because we've hit that point where now things are starting to cost money. So we're sort of pivoting now to restructuring a little bit and recasting our thinking around getting some external investors. We also need to expand our team a little bit and bring in some more technical members. So we're actually about to go into a hiring phase, if you want to call it that. And again, FedTech has been really instrumental in helping us tap into previous cohorts and the broader FedTech community to help source some of that knowledge and source some of those contacts that could potentially join our team. So there's an ongoing relationship that's if not daily, it's at least weekly that we're interacting with FedTech right now.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Dirk said. I think it's primarily about keeping those lines of communication open and knowing that we still have access to some of those resources and the expertise. Again, things are happening at such a breakneck speed during the cohort itself that sometimes you realize, oh man, I really needed this kind of consultation that I didn't have time to address because we were just so focused on customer discovery, or we were talking to partners or whatnot. So I think it's a good refresher from that perspective. Also, talking to alumni like this, I mean, the number one thing, if I could give you a lesson from the previous alumni that I learned was, when you're talking about raising money, you really only want to raise money to hire or to build, right? And that it's okay to want to pay yourself. Like investors, institutional investors, they understand that, that's what you need to do. They want you to pay yourself. It's just good to have, you think that that's the case, but it's just good to actually validate it and to understand that those are the primary reasons for you to raise, right? Just to keep you focused. I think that as we've been trying to build out our expertise, because we've had access to our inventor, who we've had a very positive relationship with, but as we as we don't expect to, have them on retainer and have their ear for, the next year or two unrestrained. We want to replace some of that expertise. So being able to access those networks and those resources and looking for experts in computer science and optics, specifically with a bend towards cardiology, navigating all those networks, especially when you're looking for something so niche, has been helpful as opposed to starting from zero. And then on milestones, I think, we've come to pretty agreeable terms on a research and development license. We've finished our software evaluation license. I think I mentioned we incorporated. We have gone through the process with MITRE of building the full prototype that they had internally. So both one of my other co-founders and I have physically built the hardware for the prototype and also executed and gone through, debugged, understand the modularization process of how all the software is done. So really from beginning to end, we have built the product hands-on. And we are also in the process of collating our data for FDA processes. So those are some of the milestones that I think we've achieved over the last month and a half.
Yeah, and on that front, I think it's been incredibly clear that you guys are really progressing very well. And just because we're running up on time here, 30 seconds or less, Dirk, I'll start with you, and then Andrew, will have you close out. Why should we have about 120 people on this call right now. Why should any one of them apply for the Homeland Security Startup Studio 2023? Dirk, 30 seconds or less.
If you've ever thought about starting a business in a dual use technology sector, you can't find a safer and more resource place to do it than through this program. You're going to be given every potential resource that you could need to be successful. It's up to you to use it and get it done. So this is really the place to do it.
Andrew?
If you're interested in building something that will solve problems in both the commercial and the public sphere, and as Dirk mentioned, you want support along the way, then join this program. Just be aware of the time commitments and be prepared to get your hands dirty.
Well, thank you both so much for coming in. Really just enjoyed this conversation, and I think it was incredibly useful and valuable for all of our audience members. So Greta, I'm going to turn it over to you just to close out here. And then again, we'll be dropping the link for the Q&A session. So if you do have any questions for anybody on the FedTech team, we'll be there to answer any of your questions. And again, thank you, Andrew and Dirk, again.
Pleasure. Take care, everyone.
Good luck.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Dirk. Always a pleasure to see you. I can't believe it. It was just about a year ago when we first met you and interviewed you, and now look at all you've built and done. So great. All right. So everybody, thank you so much again for joining the event today. And I'm just going to go through a quick sort of final announcements for everyone. I also want to address a few questions that came in the chat and just address them publicly. So firstly, this program is not exclusive for American citizens, so you don't need to be an American citizen to apply. If you're an entrepreneur and you're interested in participating, feel free to just submit an application. Again, that link has been added to the chat. Also, it's available on FedTech's website, and we'll also blast it out over email to all the participants after the call today. I also want to add as well, just to clarify, there have been some questions. This is not an accelerator, right? So it's a traditional sort of studio model. So that means we will pair entrepreneurs with technology and IP from various labs, often federal labs, and then give you the tools to build a company around that and ideally go on and commercialize it. So just want to clarify that. We get a lot of questions and sometimes a little bit of confusion with some people who apply with their own technology and company that's already started. Again, this is not an accelerator program. So I hope that answers some of the main questions we got in the chat here. And of course, though, we are available here shortly for the virtual Q&A if you want to talk more. But as it relates to my final announcements, as I just mentioned earlier, the 2023 applications are live and they're open until January 9th. However, I recommend you go on and get your application in early. You'll be able to, there's some different sort of recordings you have to do, and also just gives you a bit more time to connect with the FedTech staff and also for us to review it as well. So please feel free to submit an application today. And then also, if you are an inventor and you would like to submit your IP for consideration for the program, again, we are looking for 10 technologies to be paired with 10 teams. Feel free to contact FedTech directly. So you can contact my colleague, Jake O'Keefe. So he's in charge in managing the technology sourcing and management portion for this. So he would be delighted to speak with you and talk to you more about the program. And with that, so we are now going to formally end the event here shortly, and we will transition to our optional Q&A portion. So again, if you want to talk to a FedTech staff member and S&T staff member, just learn a little bit more about the experience and what you can expect. We will be there, and I believe my colleague has dropped it in the chat. There we go. So feel free to jump on. That's just a normal Zoom link. And then lastly, I just want to thank everyone for joining us for the event today, and a big thank you to our program partner, S&P, Dr. Howerton, and last but certainly not least, Derek and Andrew for joining. It was such a pleasure to see you all today. And I hope everyone on the call today applies. And again, feel free to stop by and see us at the virtual Q&A session. Thank you so much, everyone.